In the heart of the city stood the Grand Courthouse, a place where truth and lies battled under the vaulted ceiling, where justice was supposed to shine above prejudice, power, and wealth. Every morning, polished shoes clicked against marble floors as lawyers, officers, and nervous defendants filed into its echoing halls. Yet on this particular day, something unusual stirred the air, something that would change not only the proceedings of a single case, but the lives of everyone present, including the most untouchable man in the room, Judge Harold Whitmore. Judge Whitmore was a towering figure in the legal world. With decades of service, a reputation carved from stern rulings, and an intimidating glare that could silence even the most seasoned attorneys. He was known as the Iron Gavel. People respected him, feared him, and believed that nothing could crack the stone-cold persona he had built. But beneath the black robe and the dignified posture was a man who held tightly guarded secrets, ones he believed buried so deep, no one alive would dare bring them to the surface. To him, the courtroom was his kingdom, and in it he reigned unchallenged. That morning, as sunlight streamed through tall stained glass windows, the courtroom filled with the buzz of a high-profile trial. The press lined the back row, their cameras flashing like lightning, reporters whispering predictions about the case that had already gripped the city for weeks. At the center of the storm sat a girl, barely 16, fragile-looking, with dark hair pulled back into a messy braid, and eyes too piercing for her age. She was the key witness, the one whose testimony could sway the scales of justice. Yet unlike most who stood before Judge Whitmore trembling, this girl sat upright, calm, and almost unnervingly confident. Her name was Alara. Alara was no ordinary girl. Those who had met her spoke in hushed tones about the strange way she seemed to know things she shouldn't, the way she could peer into your eyes and say words that left you shaken. Some dismissed it as intuition, others as trickery, but those who had experienced it firsthand never forgot. And today, she was about to prove herself before the most powerful skeptic she had ever faced. When the bailiff called the room to order, silence fell like a heavy curtain. Judge Whitmore entered, his robe sweeping behind him as he ascended the bench. His eyes scanned the room with the sharpness of a hawk, pausing only briefly on Alara before moving on. She returned his gaze without flinching, and that single moment unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He quickly brushed it off. "Court is now in session," his booming voice declared. The lawyers began their arguments, laying out evidence, countering each other's points, and presenting witnesses. Yet the real anticipation came when Alara was called to the stand. The audience leaned forward, breaths held as the young girl placed her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. "You may be seated," Judge Whitmore said, his tone patronizing as he studied her. To him, she looked too young, too fragile, too naive to carry the weight of testimony that mattered. In his mind, this was a waste of time. The defense attorney stepped forward. "Miss Alara, you claim you can read people's minds. Is that correct?" His voice dripped with skepticism, and the courtroom chuckled softly at the absurdity of the claim. "Yes," she replied simply, her tone unwavering. "And you believe this ability of yours has relevance here today?" "I don't just believe," she said, locking eyes with him. "I know." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. The defense attorney smirked and turned toward the judge, gesturing as if to say, "See what we're dealing with?" Judge Whitmore raised a brow. "Young lady, this courtroom is not a stage for fantasy. We deal in facts and evidence, not parlor tricks." His voice was sharp, final, the kind that usually ended any nonsense before it began. But Alara did not falter. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "You can't fool me," she said softly. The words echoed strangely in the stillness, carrying a weight far heavier than their simplicity suggested. The spectators shifted uncomfortably. Even the lawyers glanced at one another, unsure of what to make of it. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, his lips curling into a smirk. "And what exactly is it that I am supposedly trying to fool you about?" he asked mockingly, his deep voice dripping with disdain. Alara's gaze sharpened. "You hide behind your robe and your gavel," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "You pretend that justice is all you care about, but I see the truth. I see what you've done, what you've tried to bury." The judge froze. For the first time in decades of commanding a courtroom, he felt the ground shift beneath him. A flicker of something crossed his eyes. Fear? Recognition? He quickly covered it with a laugh, a booming sound that filled the room. "This is nonsense," he declared, waving a hand dismissively. "The child has an overactive imagination." But Alara didn't blink. She leaned closer to the microphone, her small hand steady on the wood of the stand. "You think no one knows," she whispered. "But I know about the night in Brighton. I know what happened when you were supposed to be upholding the law. I know about the man whose life you destroyed." The room erupted into gasps. Reporters scrambled to scribble notes, cameras flashed wildly, and lawyers shouted objections. Judge Whitmore slammed his gavel repeatedly, his face turning red. "Order! Order in the court!" he roared, but the damage was done. His smirk had vanished. His mask of control was cracking, and everyone could see it. Alara sat back in her chair, unshaken, her eyes still locked on his. "You can hide from them," she said quietly, "but not from me." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The reporters sensed a scandal larger than any trial they had come to cover. The lawyers exchanged frantic whispers, and the jury stared wide-eyed, unsure what to believe. Judge Whitmore, the man untouchable for decades, was visibly shaken in front of them all, and that was only the beginning. The city never slept, but after that night at Lycio, Anna felt as though every shadow carried whispers of what had happened. News traveled fast. Anonymous social media posts about a mysterious waitress who disarmed armed robbers, grainy security camera clips that leaked online, rumors spreading like fire. The world was curious, but Anna Carter wasn't looking for fame. She just wanted to disappear back into the routine that had shielded her for so long. Yet the world doesn't let heroes vanish so easily. A visit in the morning. The morning after the robbery, Anna arrived at work early, hoping to blend into the quiet hum of preparation. But as she pushed through the staff entrance, she froze. Waiting by the bar was James Colton. He was dressed simply. Dark jacket, no tie, no entourage. But power radiated from him effortlessly. His eyes followed her as she set down her bag and slipped on her apron. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly, not meeting his gaze. "And yet, here I am," Colton replied calmly. "You didn't just stop a robbery, Anna. You saved lives. People deserve to know who you are." Anna's jaw tightened. "I'm a waitress. That's all." Colton studied her in silence, then smiled faintly. "No, that's what you chose to be, not what you are." Whispers of the past. For the rest of the day, Anna worked as if nothing had changed, but Colton's words followed her like a shadow. He hadn't pressed her, but his knowing gaze carried weight. And the truth was, he was right. She wasn't just a waitress. Years before, she had been Sergeant Anna Carter, decorated for valor, trained in combat and strategy. She had led a team overseas, watched friends fall in battles most people never heard about. When she returned, the medals meant nothing. The world she came back to had no place for her except behind a tray. That was the life she chose. Silence, anonymity, invisibility. Until fate shattered it. The Billionaire's offer later that week, Colton returned. This time not as a customer, but as a man with purpose. He asked for a private word. "I run a foundation," he explained, seated across from her in the empty dining hall. "We support veterans, train them, give them work, help them rebuild lives. I want you to join us. Not as a charity case, I'm calm as a leader." Anna stared at him, stunned. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Colton said. "I saw you when everyone else saw nothing. You have discipline, courage, judgment, and you didn't act for recognition. That's the kind of strength this world needs." Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. It had been years since anyone had spoken to her like that. Not as a servant, not as someone broken, but as someone who still mattered. The choice for nights afterward, Anna wrestled with the offer. The ghosts of her past told her to stay hidden, to keep her life small and safe. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of those she'd lost, and the trembling faces she had saved at Lycio. Maybe Colton was right. Maybe invisibility wasn't survival. Maybe it was surrender. Finally, she gave her answer. "I'll do it," she told him, her voice steady. "But on one condition. You never tell the world who I was that night. They don't need to know my name." Colton smiled knowingly. "Fair enough. But sooner or later, Anna, the world will know you by what you do, not what you hide." A new beginning. Months passed, and whispers about the waitress at Lycio faded into rumor. But behind the scenes, Anna's life transformed. She began training other veterans, helping them find purpose, guiding them with the same calm strength that had stunned a room full of elites. Colton gave her the resources, but it was Anna's discipline, her humility, her resilience that made it work. The woman who had once been invisible was now changing lives, quietly, without headlines, without applause. And though the world may never know the full story, one billionaire did. He had seen her strength, her dignity, her fire, and he knew that the night Anna Carter rose from the shadows, the world itself had shifted, even if she never claimed the credit. Because true dignity, as Anna proved, doesn't demand recognition. It simply is. The city never slept. But after that night at Lycio, Anna Carter felt as though every shadow carried whispers of what had happened. Social media buzzed with anonymous posts about the mysterious waitress who had disarmed armed robbers. Grainy security camera clips leaked online, and rumors spread like wildfire. Everyone was curious about the quiet young woman who had turned the tables on chaos, yet Anna wasn't looking for fame. She had always preferred to move through the world unnoticed, to blend into routines that had shielded her from both the elite's arrogance and the lingering echoes of her past. She arrived at the restaurant early the next morning, hoping to slip into the quiet rhythm of preparation unnoticed. But there he was, James Colton, standing by the bar, dressed simply in a dark jacket, no tie, no entourage, yet exuding effortless authority. His eyes followed her as she set down her bag and slipped on her apron. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly, avoiding his gaze, but he merely smiled faintly, replying, "And yet here I am. You didn't just stop a robbery, Anna. You saved lives. People deserve to know who you are." Her jaw tightened. "I'm a waitress. That's all." He studied her in silence, then shook his head. "No, that's what you chose to be, not what you are." The weight of his words settled on her like a shadow, reminding her of the life she had left behind. Sergeant Anna Carter, decorated for valor, trained in combat and strategy, someone who had led teams overseas and watched friends fall in battles most people never heard of. When she returned, medals meant nothing, and the world she came back to had no place for her except behind a tray, in uniforms that faded into the background of high society's glare. The offer he extended that day was as unexpected as it was tempting. He spoke of his foundation, of supporting veterans, training them, giving them purpose, asking her to join not as a charity case but as a leader, someone to guide and inspire others who had fallen into shadows like she once had. She wrestled with the decision for nights, haunted by the ghosts of her past and the quiet life she had chosen for safety. Yet every time she closed her eyes, the trembling faces of those she had protected at Lycio appeared, as did the memory of the intruders, frozen for mere seconds by her calm, decisive actions, a testament to the discipline she had honed for years. Finally, she agreed under one condition. Her identity that night would remain secret. The world didn't need to know her name, only the impact of her actions. Months passed, whispers about the waitress at Lycio faded into rumor. Yet behind the scenes, Anna's life transformed. She trained other veterans, guiding them with the same calm strength that had stunned a room full of elites, using the resources Colton provided but relying on her own discipline, humility and resilience to inspire real change. She moved through this new life quietly, her fame irrelevant, her presence unnoticed by the masses, yet profoundly felt by those whose lives she touched. Colton watched her progress with quiet pride, knowing that the woman who had once been invisible now wielded her strength to shift lives, to carve meaning from struggle, to build dignity where none had seemed possible. The world at large would never know the full story, would never see the battles fought in silence, the courage displayed without applause, the quiet moments of fear turned into action. Yet in the rare moments when Anna allowed her self-reflection, she saw the impact she had made and understood that true dignity, true power, was not in recognition or headlines but in the lives changed quietly, irrevocably, by unwavering discipline and unassuming courage. In her apartment that evening, sunlight filtering through the blinds, she reviewed the notes from her first training session with new recruits, a faint smile touching her lips. Each step she took, each instruction she gave, was a reminder that strength could be anonymous, that resilience could be quiet, and that the world could shift imperceptibly because someone had chosen to rise, to act, and to lead. The shadows of the past were never far, but Anna had learned to navigate them with grace, turning experience into guidance, pain into purpose, and invisibility into influence. She had walked through chaos, through mockery, through fear, and emerged not as a hero in the public eye, but as one in the truest sense. Someone who changed the world not for recognition, but because it was right, because it mattered, because she refused to allow indifference or cruelty to prevail. Each day she moved among the people she once served, no longer invisible but still quietly unassuming, leaving an imprint of strength on the hearts of those who witnessed it, teaching the next generation that courage is often silent, that dignity need not seek applause, and that the moments when one stands alone can ripple outward to transform lives in ways the world may never see, but will always feel. And through it all, James Colton remained a silent witness, the billionaire who had recognized the truth in a young waitress's eyes, who understood that some strength is too quiet for society to notice yet too profound to ignore, knowing that Anna Carter, once overlooked and underestimated, had become a force reshaping the world quietly, profoundly, irreversibly, embodying the essence of courage, discipline, and dignity that demanded no spotlight to shine,